While Putin and Trump negotiate in Alaska, the war continues. And Ukraine has been carrying out a series of attacks deep inside the territory of the Russian Federation. Western media, of course, will comment on attacks against supposedly more strategic ships or even attacks against refineries. But here, above all, what matters are attacks against civilians, which, what a surprise, practically never appear in the media in question. The results of the negotiations, however, for now are quite uncertain, since both sides have spoken of extremely fruitful negotiations. Some positive results. On a preliminary basis, though, not much has been finalized. And in this regard, those of us who, from the beginning, said that this would most likely end up being just another way of kicking the can down the road, about the idea of Trump as a great peacemaker, well, we were actually right. Russia needs time to achieve the objectives of the special military operation. The United States doesn't really have any tool that's effective enough to put pressure on that country, which they don't want to acknowledge publicly. Are they already moving on to the 19th package of sanctions in the European Union? These people really don't care if an agreement is reached or not. It's reached to none, because the sanctions warned about it. Even before the summit between Trump and Putin was held, they were going to keep being approved anyway. However, the American ones for now will wait, because for Donald Trump the meeting has been extremely positive. Vladimir Putin, after emphasizing that what needs to be eliminated are, first of all, the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis. Basically, that NATO stops waging war against the Russian Federation. Let me translate it for you, since he has invited the American leader to Moscow.
Thank you. We'll talk and see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, and thank you all. Thank you.
And it looks like there will be another meeting, that's right, on August 18th. It seems that Trump has announced a meeting with Zelensky, which I don't know if he has already been invited or not yet. Maybe they'll tell him on August 17th in the afternoon. Yes, that's right, because Ukraine is the one with the least say in all of this, and yet in the West, of course, they have to try to save their public image. Collectively, let's call it that. So now what is being emphasized above all are the latest attacks that Ukraine has been carrying out against the territory of the Russian Federation. It's true that some of the targets are deep inside Russia. We're talking about around 800 kilometers or so. The most important targets have turned out to be the port of Ola and also an oil refinery, a very important one. It's true that it's located in the Samara region. There is some damage at the refinery, but rest assured that it will end up being repaired. There are still many refineries in the territory of the Russian Federation, that's one thing. On the other hand, what was supposedly hit by Ukraine was a ship carrying Iranian drones. It could be that there's actually almost nothing true about it. Some mechanisms for those drones, maybe ammunition, that's yet to be seen, but really, now? Most of the drones used in the special military operation are produced within the territory of the Russian Federation. So, well, who knows what they might have hit on that ship, and it's true that it's very hard to determine. But the most important thing isn't even these attacks on supposedly military targets, according to Ukraine. Let's assume that they're actually right, but rather attacks against civilians. 1 person dead in the last 24 hours in Kursk, another one in Donetsk. And also, the attacks have continued in the territory of the Belgorod region, which have been happening, well, for at least 3 days now, or at least intensifying. Also, that is well, Ukraine seems to be carrying out a series of preparations, has been carrying out a series of preparations for the meeting between Putin and Trump. This seems to somehow make Ukraine send a message to the entire international community that it continues to bring the war to the territory of the Russian Federation. But really, it's an absolute blunder, because even, watch out, a Republican congresswoman, and she hasn't been the only voice in the United States, not by a long shot, to express herself in these terms, since she posted on her X account. I believe indeed the map of Ukrainian attacks, almost saying that they want to sabotage the peace talks between Trump and Putin. From here on, of course, Ukraine will end up getting what it deserves, but I feel really sorry about it. The civilian population, the vast majority of whom, by the way, often end up as victims of Ukraine's own air defense. Regardless, our civilians should never have to suffer. The Kiev regime will get what it deserves, without a doubt. First of all, they already got it when they didn't invite Zelensky to a summit where supposedly the future of Ukraine is being decided. In other words, they have shown him exactly where he stands, and now I imagine they're going to reiterate it once he flies to Washington. However, the most important thing is not just the definitive confirmation that Ukraine has no sovereignty at all, nor even the advances on the front lines that we discussed in yesterday's report. They are still happening, and today and tomorrow we will update them. But Russia is really advancing non-stop. And here we get to the heart of the matter. I really think the agreement, this is my theory, I'd love to hear your opinion about it. I think the point is to keep negotiating until the exact moment when Russia gets everything it has planned to get from this special military operation. That is, full liberation of the territories, at least of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. It is still unclear if this will include the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. Not as they are today, but completely, as they are in administrative terms, now included on the map of Ukraine on one hand, but they also appear in the constitution of the Russian Federation on the other. And this denotes a tremendous victory for Russia, but personally, I would say for Vladimir Putin, because the special military operation began as a really well-planned step, and we are seeing it right now by the reaction, especially from the United States. The whole world, well, actually all of the West, raised an outcry and began to isolate Russia. However, yesterday we saw how they rolled out a red carpet for him, and not just anywhere, but right in the United States. What about all this? Isn't that the country that's one of the main organizers of everything that's unfortunately happening today in Ukrainian territory? This initial victory is already underway. They've negotiated a sequels, and Putin surely anticipated this outcome. But does it also confirm what I said earlier? It doesn't seem like the West, especially the United States, has any real leverage over the Russian Federation. So I understand that they, in turn, realize that the only way for the American president to come out of this looking good, and if possible, which he seems to want, with a Nobel Peace Prize, they have to wait for Russia to get exactly everything it wants, to be about to get it. And then meet again and talk about the fact that if it weren't for Donald Trump, this definitely would not have been stopped. And here, for the end of this video, I have prepared two phrases from the negotiations that I find absolutely key. In addition, of course, to making the conclusion of that the Ukrainian attacks do nothing once again but worsen the situation of that country. So, once again, they're ruining their own future. But above all, first of all, Donald Trump saying that if it weren't for him, of course, it had to be emphasized. But the Russian Federation would already be taking over all of Ukraine, giving Russia a very, very, very special power. You tell me if you think they have it or not. But in media terms, that very high place has already been claimed by Trump. On the other hand, the response comes secondly from the Russian Federation. Vladimir Putin saying, repeating Trump's thesis that if Donald Trump had been president in 2022, this conflict wouldn't have even started. Each one here already really has exactly what they wanted. I would say that the Russian Federation needs as much time as it needs to finish what it has set out to do. Ultimately, the goal is a decisive, overwhelming victory, the special military operation. The American side, especially very personally, Donald Trump, that place he is carving out in history, because I would say that's mainly what matters to him, much more than ending the conflict, whether X or Y. Especially considering that it doesn't seem like he has too many levers of pressure over the Russian Federation. That said, and here's an open question for you. Let's see if you can answer it for me. Where does Ukraine stand in all of this? Russia has its own, the United States has its own, but what's going on? And what will happen to Ukraine in the end?